Now that Ne Zha 2 has become a $2 billion film and has passed Infinity War at the box office, I find it appropriate to stop and rank the top 10 highest grossing movies of all time. If you want to rank these movies too, go ahead. Join me in the comment section below and you can add your ranking in there. With that said, let's get started. Although this movie is not that rewatchable, it also isn't a bad return to form from Star Wars. It's been about 13 years between Revenge of the Sith and The Force Awakens, and The Force Awakens starts off as a very promising start to the return of Star Wars. And there's a lot of great moments in this movie I like. It served as a very promising start to this trilogy that eventually went downhill, because I had no plan. Although this plot is very similar to A New Hope, almost copy and paste of A New Hope in a way, almost, served as the introduction to these new characters, to this time period of Star Wars, and all the job that this movie was supposed to do, it delivered on that. It delivered on the expectations that many fans had, and delivered on what they wanted. But the rest of the trilogy didn't. But this one is the standout of the newer trilogy movies that eventually killed off Star Wars. Jurassic Park franchise is back with Jurassic World, and like Force Awakens, this serves as the great return to form for the franchise. Now, out of the newer Jurassic World trilogies, Jurassic World is easily the best one. Dominion, I think, is absolutely terrible. I'm not looking forward to rewatching that. Fallen Kingdom, I think, is fine, but Jurassic World is easily the best out of the entire bunch. And why couldn't the rest of the trilogy just keep what Jurassic World did? I felt like the rest of the trilogy just kind of ventured off and kind of did its own thing and never truly tied back into Jurassic World. Jurassic World kept everything that you liked about Jurassic Park and added its own flair to it. It didn't fully feel like a copy and paste. Yes, the final battle is over the top, CGI dinosaur versus CGI dinosaur, but other than that, I really enjoy this movie. It still offers its own unique spin to it, while adding a new cast of characters that the movie makes you connect with in just the first movie alone. All the actors are able to add such charm to those characters. This movie reminds me a lot of The Force Awakens, just because the first movie in the trilogy is solid and a great start, but then the rest of the trilogy falls off. This one falls off more than Star Wars did, but the first one is better than The Force Awakens. James Cameron did it again and made a 3-hour movie completely fly by. James Cameron just has this talent at making these 3-hour movies fly by like they're nothing. But still, the fact that Avatar is the highest grossing movie of all time and still is the highest grossing movie of all time is kind of crazy, because this wouldn't be the movie that you would guess to be the highest grossing movie of all time. Is the movie good? Yeah, it's good. I'm invested in the world, CGI. The visuals of it is fantastic. The main reason why the movie made as much money as it did is, of course, the standout of the movie. And James Cameron just does a good job at sucking you in this world, and you're just invested in the story and just the landscaping of the world. That is also helped from the amazing score and the actors and actresses acting in here. But it still is a predictable story for it to be the highest grossing movie of all time. But hey, an original movie is the highest grossing movie of all time. That's something nice to hear. It is also James Cameron coming off of Titanic, so kind of makes sense why it earned a lot of money, especially with the new visuals and 3D technology that the movie had. It's just because it's the highest grossing of all time, I just have to say that it's overrated. Although I do love this movie and I'm excited to see what James Cameron has for the rest of the franchise of Avatar, the highest grossing movie of all time might be a bit too much. Pixar finally returns with Inside Out 2. They've been stuck on Disney Plus, and when they did return to theaters, we had movies like Lightyear and Elemental. I'm not a fan of Elemental. Some people are. I think it's one of the worst Pixar movies. But Pixar is finally able to come back, return to the flair of what makes Pixar great, and is able to make a sequel that's better than the first movie. We return back to that Pixar magic. Not quite Incredibles level, but still Pixar magic of the first Inside Out movie, and still telling that theme that Pixar always tells. That strong theme that they always have in their story. And Inside Out 2 delivered on that. One of the things I like about Inside Out 2 is that it grew up with its audience. People that watched the first Inside Out movie were probably like, I don't know, 8 when it came out. 9 years later, they aged up to the age that Riley is in this movie now, and they connect with it a lot more. That's the thing about these Inside Out movies. You could keep making them and keep aging up Riley, and everyone's just going to consistently relate to her because the movies keep consistently growing up with this audience. And I just like the story in here a lot more than I did for the first movie. This time around, sadness is not with joy. Instead, we get everyone else in the memory maze thing, whatever it's called. And we get a new cast of characters. We get anxiety, envy, ennui, embarrassment. And I can't wait to see what those characters do in Inside Out 3. And how they decide to implement the mind even more. I already like what they added in Inside Out 2 on how certain thing works when you grow up. So I'm just curious to see how would Inside Out 3 add more to that with growing up and becoming I would guess you'll be 18 in the third one, so what is like becoming an adult? Hopefully, Pixar is able to carry the trend of Inside Out 2 and bring it to Elio. I am nervous about Elio from the reshoots and stuff like that. I hope it delivers the same magic that Inside Out 2 brought. And I hope Pixar goes back to what they did in that Renaissance era of Pixar with The Incredibles, Finding Nemo, and all those classic movies, and bring the same theme that those movies brought. I hope Pixar just carries everything great about Inside Out 2 into the rest of their movies. After 13 years, Avatar returns with a sequel, and makes it better than the original. The story is stronger, it's not as predictable, there's some few predictable aspects in here, but it's not as predictable as the first movie was. But the visual effects are a huge step up. The first movie is known for its visual effects, but the second one, it looks a lot better. But the newer technology is what makes it look great. When it comes to the water or just the way the characters look now, it just looks better and looks more real. Now, I'm not saying the first movie doesn't look real because it's the highest grossing movie of all time for that exact reason. But there's just a new look to it that it just brings a more realistic look. And we get a new cast of characters in here, and I like what they do with Jake Sully's kids. But the movie's 3 hours, and James Cameron takes his time making you connect to every single character. You learn what they're going through. It sets up their arcs for the rest of the franchise. And that's the pro for the movie being 3 hours long, is that you're able to learn about every single character without it feeling rushed. And the movie did that. Now 3 hours. I feel like the first movie was able to handle the 3 hour mark a lot better. This movie, there's a few slow moments here and there. Unlike the first Avatar movie where there was no slow moments and it just flew by. This time, there's a few slow moments in here, but the 3 hour didn't feel like 3 hours still, and still flew by. I'm excited to see what James Cameron decides to deliver for the rest of the franchise, and we're getting the third one this December, so I can't wait to see what he decides to do to carry this franchise on. Then we have the newest movie in the highest grossing film category, Ne Zha 2. Now, if you live in America or anywhere on this side of the world that's not in the area where China is, you have no idea what this movie is. All of a sudden, it became the highest grossing animated movie of all time and joined the $2 billion club, the first animated movie to ever do that. And it came out of absolutely nowhere. If you live in China or wherever this movie takes place, it's all over the place, which is the thing of why this movie is the highest grossing movie of all time is thanks to that part of the world. But here, no one is talking about it. In opening weekend here, it made a decent amount, but nowhere near the highest grossing film of all time. That's why it's kind of like, whoa, this movie's on this list. $2 billion. The movie deserves it 100%. I'm glad a small scale movie like this, well, at least here, small scale, I'm glad a movie like this is in the highest grossing movies of all time category. And the movie is still making a lot more money, and, well, at the time of filming this, it hasn't passed Force Awakens yet, but it's going to, like, any day now. It's getting really close to joining, like, the top 5 highest grossing movies of all time. And does it deserve it? Yes, this movie is fantastic. Now, The first movie, I liked it. It has its problems, and those problems stood out, but nice simple story. The second one, on the other hand, takes everything great about that first movie and times it by 100. The flaws are no longer there, and the entire movie is just fantastic. It has the storytelling of like Puss in Boots: The Last Wish with like the theme and stuff. Not the same thing, but kind of like the storytelling of that. It still has the humor and action that anime would. I compare it to DBZ, Dragon Ball Z, because the action scenes in the finale are almost identical to what Dragon Ball Z does. The animation is stunning. From the first frame of the movie, you can tell that they put a lot more work into it. A lot of the high moments of this movie stuck with my mind for a while. It's been about 4 weeks since I watched this movie, and I still think about that one moment in the final action scene. If you've seen the movie, you know what moment I'm talking about. But there's this one moment in the final action scene that I've been thinking about for a long time. And the movie kind of sets up Ne Zha 3 in a way. And the way this movie ended, I can't wait for Ne Zha 3. And I hope it comes sooner than, 6 years between the first and second movie. I hope it comes sooner than that, because that would be a crazy amount to wait for. If you haven't seen Ne Zha 2, give it a chance, because it's great. This movie is such a treat to Spider-Man fans. The entire movie is just paying homage to what the previous movie set up. It's almost like they planned it from the start with Tobey Maguire's movies to eventually make them cross over for how well this movie paid it all off. It kind of wrapped up Tobey's storyline, it kind of wrapped up Andrew's storyline, and it definitely wrapped up Tom Holland's storyline for his trilogy of movies. And the movie is just such a treat to Spider-Man fans. Now, if I were to give a problem, there's a few dumb jokes. Kind of what you would expect from old Marvel. The jokes kind of break the tension of the movie. That can be annoying sometimes, but the movie is still such a treat to Spider-Man fans, and is what we waited for a while, and the movie delivered on that. Now we just have to wait for Spider-Man 4. Only a year away by this point. It went through a lot of work. We'll see if it paid off. It most likely did, but next year. Now, it's been a long time since I've seen this movie, but I'm so glad I decided to rewatch it for this ranking, because it reminded me for how much I love this movie. When I watched it a while ago, I loved it. I don't know how old I was. I'm just going to say 9 for the sake of it. But if you have a 9-year-old love a 3-hour movie that's mostly a romance movie, you know you did something right. And the movie kind of did that. James Cameron just always knows how to make a 3-hour movie fly by. Because even on rewatch right now, it didn't feel like 3 hours. James Cameron just knows exactly what he is doing on how to make a 3-hour movie fly by. And he just tells a romantic story. Take the Titanic, make it a romance, and then show the horror that this event actually was. And James Cameron does all of that. He makes you feel every emotion. He makes you feel the romantic emotion, the sad emotion, the horror emotion. You feel every emotion while watching this movie. And James Cameron was able to bring the event to life while telling a romantic story out of it. And it works. The score and set design is truly a work of art. Set design, of course, James Cameron built an almost the scale Titanic and then sunk it. And James Cameron put work into it. And the score, I love the main theme of this movie. I forgot how much I loved it, but watching this movie, there's just something to it that makes it stand out amongst all his other movies. Titanic and Avatar are his themes that stand out the most to me, and there's just something about that I like. I was reminded of how much I love this movie, but it's still not at number 1. Now, I do think out of everything on this list, this movie is the best filmed, acted, and all of those categories out of all the movies on this list. But the top 2 for me are kind of like, okay, I love the MCU. These are some of my favorite movies of all time, so kind of forgive me there. The top 2 mean more to me than Titanic does, but Titanic is still the favorite movie of mine, but the top 2 are just a bigger favorite movie of mine. Now, second, first place are kind of just together. Now, if you paid attention throughout this list, you obviously know what they are. It's kind of obvious. But second and first are kind of together, but I'm just going to talk about the movies individually. But Avengers Endgame wraps up this entire saga that was setting up. It wraps up the character arcs. It wraps up everything in Infinity War. Ends it off in a satisfying note. We were able to conclude all these character storylines on a satisfying note, while able to bring all those fan-servicing moments, all those high moments, and ended everything off the way it should have. Definitely was a event at the time, and I will never forget watching those movies in the theaters. Although I was like a month late, I remember it's still a experience of watching this kind of event. And I hope Secret Wars and Doomsday kind of match the same event. I can see it 100% happening, but this was certainly a time. Now there's a reason why this is one of my favorite movies of all time, my favorite MCU film, and my favorite comic book movie. Compared to this and Endgame, Infinity War is a lot more rewatchable. Not saying Endgame's not rewatchable because I've seen it a million times. I also seen this movie a million times, and I feel like this one just holds up better. The Russo brothers know how to focus on each character. There's a lot of characters in this movie, and there's going to be a lot more in Secret Wars, but I trust the Russo brothers in that, because this movie is able to handle each individual character, and every character has their moment that makes them feel important to the story, and every character has the right amount of screen time that they're able just to add to the story that much. And no character feels undershadowed. I just miss these type of team-up movies in the MCU. I'm glad we're finally getting our next team-up movies with the Thunderbolts, but I just miss these type of team-up movies in the MCU. We're missing that, and I'm glad we're finally going to get our next 3 team-up movies finally again in the MCU, because this was another event like Endgame. Action-packed, filled with a lot of intriguing moments. This and Endgame are kind of like the same thing, so a lot of them have the same pros to it, because they're basically the same movie, the same story, they're connected together. Infinity War I've just seen a lot more times, so it means more to me. This was a time period in the MCU. I still like the MCU, but we're still missing the team-up movies. If you like this video, maybe these ones on the side of this too. Like, subscribe, and see you guys next time. Goodbye.